Welcome, everyone. This is our lesson about our skeletal system. And we'll start from the most internal part of the body and we'll move on to the more superficial. So amazing. We're made of 206 bones, give or take a few. And I say that because when we're born, we're born with more bones, around 300. And as we age, some of these bones ossify or they join together. And what's important about this is that there's a huge variety of the human anatomy. For example, 1 in 20 people will have an extra rib, and about 10% of the population have an extra vertebrae. And so while we cannot x-ray our students as they come into our classes, we must remember that every skeleton is slightly different. Along with muscle, ligament, energy, constitution, and mood, our students are so widely unique. And as teachers, we must remember that this is that we shouldn't ask for a cookie cutter posture, demand that every student do the postures in the same way. And just because it's anatomically impossible. For example, depending on where your hip sockets face or how the bones articulate together, it may be impossible to get our knees to the floor in a seated cross-legged posture or in Padmasana. That's okay. So if as teachers, we try to push our knees down and telling our students, hey, keep working on it, this could eventually lead on to an injury. And so, we help our students navigate their bodies. And so our job is to teach our students to listen and to learn where and when they are hitting bone compression, meaning the bones are rubbing against each other. Once they get their full extension, the bones can go past it without causing an injury, or perhaps it's just a limitation of range of motion, meaning that the muscles fascia are tight. So super cool about our skeleton is that it's living, dynamic, and ever-changing, and remodeling tissue. Because of its remodeling, we have a completely different skeleton every 7 to 10 years. So think about this, guys. Every time we move into our yoga practice, we are different. In 10 years, our entire body, skeletal system, will be different. All right. So remembering this, that as we move into the postures, that the postures will be different based on what we eat, based on how much hydration we have, based on our age, based on our habits. All of this have a tremendous impact in our mobility. So setting the fluid bath of our body, it can have tensile strength of steel, but a touch of elasticity, just like a reed of bamboo, is strong yet yielding. Our skeletal system is made up of different types of cells, 2 different cells called osteoblasts and osteoclasts. And these are the ones that are constantly remodeling the bones. So when we think of our muscles leveraging movements, think of trying to lift a heavy object. Muscles via the tendons pull on the outer stocking that is around our bones called the peristeum. And with this healthy stress applied, the bone underneath, the osteoclast, starts to break down. And so this sends out a signal, hey, I'm breaking down, I need to make more bone cells. So the osteoblasts mobilize to build up bone under that stress. And this is the basis on which bones heal after a fracture. So this dance of breaking down and building up bone tissue begins to wane as we get older. And so with more breaking down than building up happening, we are sometimes left with small holes inside our honeycomb-like bones, which leads to lower bone density, weakness in the bones, and possible fractures. And we all know as we get older, a fall can be tremendous, especially if we are not using weight-bearing exercises to stimulate this bone density. And this is one of the reasons why as we get older, we get prescribed yoga or weight training, because it can help stimulate bone integrity to prepare for stronger muscles. So bone mass is composed of organic and inorganic materials, including calcium salts and connective tissue, as well as cells and blood vessels within a calcium matrix. So this combination gives both the bone and the tensile strength that we were talking about just a second ago. So by aligning the direction of the force of gravity along the major axis of the bones, we can access the strength in our yoga postures. So regular practice of yoga is beneficial for our bones. We talked about because it stimulates that, that calcium and the layers in the bone matrix. So bones, what's interesting too is that they are the body's reservoir for calcium, critical in a variety of physiological functions, including muscle contraction. So the concentration of calcium in the body is tightly regulated through a complex interplay between the skeletal and endocrine and excretory systems. So this involves feedback loops between the parathyroid gland, the kidneys, the intestines, the skin, the liver, and the bones. Let's talk a little bit about the different, well, first let's talk about the axial and the appendicular skeleton. All right, so let's look at George here. If I look at his axial skeleton, our axial skeleton is made up just, the word just like it implies, it forms the axis of the body. And so it includes the skull. And so while the skull is made up of many different bones, if I get close up, you'll see all the sutures. For the purpose of this exercise, we're going to just categorize it as the skull, one whole. We are going to differentiate though the mandible, and this is what the bone that that helps us chew our food. Underneath the mandible, we have the hyoid bone, and as you see that that bone is going to be attached to our tongue, and it's kind of suspended by underneath the mandible. Behind that, we have our the vertebral column. Oh, I forgot the ossicles. Well, this model doesn't have the ossicles, but it will be really close inside the ear. We would see the malleus, the incus, and the stapes, and these are teeny tiny bones in the inner ear. All right, so going back to the vertebral column. The vertebral column starts with the cervical spine, and it ends down at the lumbar spine, lumbar vertebrae L5. All right, from there, it also includes the sacrum, and then at the very bottom is the coccyx bone, which is a really funky tail. And then we go up onto our ribs. So we have 12 pairs of true ribs. And so we start from the top. I'm going to get closer. This is our first rib, and it goes down to the ribs that attach underneath the this bone, which is part of the appendicular skeleton, the scapula. All right, so it goes from rib 1 to rib 7, true ribs, and then we go our floating ribs, which is the 8th through the 10th. And then we have our, rather, those are the false ribs, and then at the very bottom, 11th and 12th, those are the floating ribs. All right, so that is our axial skeleton. Let's look at the appendicular skeleton. So if I isolate the appendicular skeleton, you'll see, just like the name implies, it refers to our appendages. All right, so we'll start with the clavicle. Is this bone that suspends and connects our arms to our sternum. The same thing that the scapula does, but in the back of the body. And then so they go into the arm. The humerus is the top bone connecting to the elbow. And then we have two bones here. One is the ulna that is connects to the pinky side of the arm. Then we have the thumb side, which is the radius. And then we have a bunch of teeny tiny bones, the carpals. And this is one of the most complicated joints in our bodies, guys. And so we do a lot of arm balances in yoga, or we kind of try to do arm balances in yoga. And being careful about this structure is important for a lifelong practice. So we'll spend more time talking about this later. All right, so distal to the carpals, we have the metacarpals. And then further even away from the carpals, we have the phalanges, all the way to the tip of the fingers. All right, so moving away, let's go into the legs. We have the longest bone in our body is the femur, connecting to the knee, which is a patella. And then we have the tibia, which is the big toe side of the foot, and then the lateral part of the leg is the fibula, is the lateral shin bone. And just like in our hands, we have a bunch of carpals in rather tarsus. These are the 7 rock-like bones on each foot. So distal to the tarsus, where you have the metatarsals. We go over here, the metatarsals are at the top of the foot. And then even further away from the tarsals, we have phalanges, the fingers, top of the toes, not fingers. In Spanish, there's no differentiation between fingers and toes. They're all called fingers. So that's where my translation comes from. All right, the last part of the appendicular skeleton is our pelvic girdle. And so the pelvic girdle is a yoke that connects the lower extremities to the axial skeleton. It is the seat also, the sacral plexus. That's a collection of nerves that forms the basis for the first and second chakra. And we'll talk more about that in our posture clinics. All right, so the pelvic girdle is comprised of the following structures. We have the ilium, and it is bilateral, meaning left and right. The same thing is with the pubis. It's at the front of the pelvis, left and right, rather. There you go, left and right. And then at the back of the hip, we have the ischium, also bilateral, left and right. All right, so that's it for our pelvic girdle. Next, all right, George, let's put you back in. Beautiful. All right, let's talk a little bit about the shapes of the bones. So the form or shape of a bone reflects its function. So long bones provide leverage, kind of like the femur, right? It's providing leverage for our movement. And flat bones, they provide protection and a place for broad muscles to attach. So this would be very much like the flat muscles of our, rather flat bones of our hips. You can see that. And we also have short bones that provide for weight-bearing function. So short bones, very much like the tarsus or the carpals. Yoga accesses each bone's particular potential. So using the long bones to leverage the body deeper into postures, the flat bones and their accompanying core muscles for stability, and the short vertebral bodies to bear weight. For examples of, let's see, like that. I also want to talk about this short bone structure, which of the vertebrae. Noticing how each vertebrae has a spinous process. So the end of each bone. So remember how I said that some of the population does have an extra vertebrae, and also how long that spinous process is would allow for someone to maybe have a deeper back bend, right? Because once this process touches into the next process, right? This is going to shorten the distance if you're moving your body in a backwards motion. Once this bone touches the bottom bone, you've hit maximum compression. That means that your back bend is not going to go any further, despite of how much tension you apply into, or extension rather, into your muscles. And this is where we talk a little bit of extension or compression of the muscles in order to reach their full extension once you hit that bone-on-bone compression. We'll talk about more of that in functional movement. And so imagine somebody that has an extra vertebrae, right? It's also creating a lot of space between each one of this, or a longer space for which to back bend. So next up, we're going to talk about our joints.